r/AskReddit by Reddify. What's the most disgusting thing you've ever done in your life? NSFW. Woke up in the middle of the night with a runny nose, and while laying there had the urge to sneeze. I was tightly wrapped in my bedding, and didn't want to let cool air under the blankets. So I turned my head to sneeze into the wall. A second sneeze was coming, and I had the thought that if I aimed it at a different area of the wall, it'd make less mess somehow. So I did. But I didn't have a runny nose of snot, it was a bloody nose. And I woke up in the morning to a crime scene covering about a quarter of my bedroom wall. How did you clean it up though? He didn't. He just kept sneezing till the walls were equally covered. He's half done repainting his house. Just waiting for his next flu. So I heard you paint houses? I was at work one day, going through a herd of cows during the calving season. The boss man sighted one that was about 8 months pregnant, or had been up until this point. The cow had begun to spontaneously abort the calf. The embryo, still in the bag, was 70% out of vagina and hanging loosely. Obviously this was a situation that had to corrected, and we were a good mile away from the barn and a head gate within, and on rough terrain to start with. Being the low man on the totem pole, I was, naturally, tasked with following behind the cow to drive her towards the barn. Boss man stayed up on the ridge, watching from afar with his binoculars and cell phone in hand. So I followed the cow through the briar patches and hollers, and we were getting along pretty good. It was a hot summer day, and I'd driven the animal out of the shade trees. Between the heat and physical distress, I knew she wasn't going to make it to the barn on the far side and bottom of the ridge. So I said to hell with it, and called the boss. We talked it over while the cow rested, and decided not to stress her any further. That mean I had to walk up to the top of the hill, and get some of those shoulder-length disposable gloves and a lasso, and clean her out where she stood beneath an oak tree. The cow was docile enough I was able to toss the rope across her head and tie her off to a low-hanging branch without much fuss. Then I gloved up, and got to work. The calf was coming out tail first, a breech birth and long since dead. Working my hands into her birth canal, I was able to get enough of a hold on the sack to get a good grip. I braced my feet, and with 2 or 3 good pulls I got the calf out. The sack burst upon hitting the ground, soaking my legs in embryonic fluid. Hot, slimy, fresh embryonic fluid and blood. Bad enough, right? I bent over, catching my breath. Pulling a calf by hand ain't easy. The cow coughed, at the same time giving the runny fecal matter a bit of pressure as it came out. At this time the top of my head was about at the same level as her asshole. Embryonic fluid and blood from the waist down. Diarrhea from the top of my head to the bottom of my t-shirt. I was ducking covered, and it was all mixing together to accumulate in the bottom of my muck boots. Nastiest goddamn thing I've ever done in my life. The boss man laughed while he used the pressure washer at the barn to halfway hose me off before giving me the rest of the day off. Edit. Reddit is amazing. I honestly didn't think this was going to get this kind of reaction. To the guy that gave me Reddit gold. Thank you. All of you. Thank you. You guys are absolutely awesome. This post embodies the magnificence of Reddit. Where else am I going to read a story? Among all the boring old it on my Ike stories. By an actual cowboy doing a DNC on a cow and getting unmercifully shat upon. Happy trails to you. Cowboy, cowgirl, cowperson, cowpoke, now has a whole new meaning. Had food poisoning and was throwing up and diarrhea at the same time. I couldn't sleep because it would happen every 10 minutes. So I slept naked on the bathroom floor with no rugs, so I could clean the diarrhea leaking out of my ass easier when I eventually woke up in the morning. Edit. I was so sick I didn't even think to get in the shower. Don't have a tub. I also don't know if I would have fit laying across it. This is pretty disgusting, but also really smart. If you ever get food poisoning, drink tons of water so your throw up doesn't get clumpy and stuck in your throat. I learned that one the hard way. My toilet and sink are strategically placed side by side where after food poisoning one night, I could easily eat and throw up. I felt disgusting, but it did the job. When I was broke I was living off of 20-pound bags of rice. Well, one morning I start the rice cooker going while I take a shower. I come back out to find my rice has a ton of tiny cockroaches in it. So, I figured I could use the protein and ate it anyways. Welp. This is it. I'm deleting my account. I can't be on the same site as this monster. Username checks out. That's not a username. I was the caretaker for mentally challenged people for a while. Once we suspected that this guy had eaten a rubber glove, and to be sure we had to give him an enema to see if it something came out. People who are severely handicapped and stuck in a wheelchair don't have bowel movements that often. Sometimes they can go close to a week before things start moving. That was the case with this guy. He hadn't taken a rit for like 5 days before this. He was given the enema in the bathroom and a few minutes later gave birth to a beanbag chair-sized turd on the floor. I then went to the kitchen and got a fork, which I used to mince up the it like I was portioning out a humongous sloppy joe. The glove wasn't there. I didn't eat for like 3 days after that. Oh my god. You needed the poop knife. This is the third reference to poop knife on this post. Am I missing something, or is this really a thing? I'm afraid to look. Ate a tub of ice cream between me and a guy who had potential. He kissed me after and things escalated. About 10 minutes later he's ducking my throat with reckless abandon when he decides to see how long he can hold me down on it for. Cue the return of the ice cream. He said it was still really cold when it came back up, and his ike looked like a ducked up mini milk. Edit. Apparently I should clarify, no, he was not an asshole. I was into it right up to the point where I had to apologize for the mess. Go on. There's not much more to it. Turns out being covered in cold milky vomit was somewhat of a boner killer. Some people would pay extra for that. I was sneezing like crazy and didn't know why. I tried Piriton and it did nothing. I didn't feel unwell either, so just rolled with it. A couple of days later I was round a friend's house and really sneezed hard and a little curly noodle came out of my nose. I pulled on it slowly and it slid out all wiggly, which set off my gag reflex. I just managed not to puke on my friend's floor, but I wanted to. It measured about 5 inches stretched out. It was from Chinese food I ate 4 days prior. But why did you have a noodle in your nose? I think it must have been trapped in my sinus or something. Maybe I coughed or sneezed whilst eating them, and it found its way up there? Can confirm. Sneezed while eating a spring roll. Coughed and sneezed carrots and rice noodles for a few days. I had to manually remove a giant turd that wouldn't come all the way out and was stuck about a quarter of the way. After struggling for half an hour, I finally just reached up there and started coaxing it out with my fingers. The feeling of relief was indescribable, but was overshadowed by the fact that I felt strangely violated in some way. It was the consistency of modeling clay, only maybe a little harder. It ended up looking like petrified wood. I had to break it up so it would flush. I actually thought about taking it out of the toilet and throwing it in the trash at one point. Don't do opiates. Kids, this could have been made easier through the use of a good poop knife. Edit. Thanks for the gold. Anonymous poop knife aficionado. So glad the poop knife has grown in popularity. Ye old poop knife. I got the norovirus. Came down with it during a trip to Ikea. Made it home. But ended up with an immediate need to throw up and have violent diarrhea at the same time. I ended up on the toilet with a plastic bag in my lap for me to bath in. But the bag had a couple tiny holes in it. So it ended up with little streams of puke going in 2 directions. Added bonus, after everything subsided, I blew my nose and half an Ikea meatball came flying out. Okay, that's rough. Are you happy you asked? No. Wasn't me who did it, but my 1-year-old daughter ate the scabby stub of my newborn son's umbilical cord. No. Always been wondering when she's going to turn into a cannibal and eat one of us in our sleep. Dad, when are you going a new baby? I really want to have another piece of that delicious stuff, a new baby sister. Not intentionally, but this is how it went. Baby me is usually fussy. Mom leaves me in crib for a while. Wonders why I'm unusually quiet. Goes in to check on me. Baby me is busy eating own poop. Oh boy, I can actually beat this. My little brother is 8 years younger than me. We had to drag him to a large dinner when he was about a year old. The restaurant is mid-fancy. We're a tiny bit dressed up, and it's packed. We are seated, with placed drink and appetizer orders. And my other brother, only a year younger than me, will not stop complaining about how hungry he is. The adults are shushing him repeatedly. Tensions are high. Suddenly, he wails. It's no fair. Why does Scott already get to eat? We all turn to look at Scott. He is going to town on something in his hand. His other hand is buried in his diaper. My mom shrieks in oh, snatches him from his high chair, and sprints into the bathroom. After a moment of stunned silence, my brother pukes a stream of bile into the middle of the table. We didn't stick around to order entrees. Years later, my father informed me that a restaurant employee also puked, only into his hands, and running top speed toward the kitchen. Poor guy. I hope you remind your little brother of this story whenever you go out to eat. I remember the story for the first time in years recently during his college graduation dinner. We were at an all-you-can-eat Brazilian steakhouse. So naturally I started and then told the story in great detail as soon as they took our drink orders, so that as I was finishing they were bringing around the first skewers. Imagine this is that grinning purple devil energy. When I was in the army, my unit left for a few weeks for some training. When we returned we saw a wasp nest up by our company area. So naturally we knocked it down and threw it into the grass behind the building. Next day after PT we find the nest in the grass. Has a bunch of dew from the night before on it. And no wasps. Because we're a bunch of stupid grunts. It immediately became a bidding war to get another one of our guys who's to eat it. Which eventually he agrees for the price of $40. Pops it into his mouth. Chews for maybe a minute and pops a few larvae still inside and immediately throws it back up. Right into my hand. Without missing a beat I hear my squad leader shout out, "Now you eat it. Assert your dominance over him." And that's how I earned $40. A half-drunk Dr. Pepper. And dominance over my entire company who watched me eat that half-chewed and vomited wasp nest. It's also how I can guarantee my fiancée won't kiss me for a few hours. Because she hates that story. Grunts are stupid. It's in our nature to do stupid things. Edit. Thanks for the gold. /u/I am for the go. Now when I tell the story I can add and I also got some Reddit gold too. The reward got sweeter. Based on my experience, being in an infantry company, this probably wasn't even the dumbest thing done that week. Not even remotely. What was the absolute dumbest thing done during that week? Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.